Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a massive turning point in history. We're talking about the reunification of a completely fractured Indian subcontinent and the dawn of what is widely known as a golden age, an era that literally changed the world.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with India's classical golden age, look at the forging of the Gupta Empire, explore its cultural and scientific zenith, examine the seeds of imperial decline, and finally wrap up with its enduring civilizational legacy. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. India's classical golden age.
So the Gupta dynasty spans this tight, incredibly packed 230-year epic. It kicks off around 320 CE, and that's followed almost immediately by some really aggressive military expansion. By 375, they've hit this incredible cultural zenith. But, look at how fast things turn. By 455, the invasions begin, and by 550, the whole empire completely dissolves. Now, to really appreciate their meteoric rise, you gotta imagine the sheer chaos that came right before them. Following the fall of the Kushana and Satavahana powers, the subcontinent was totally fractured. It was a mess, but the Guptas stepped right into this void. They essentially pieced the puzzle back together, restoring a level of political unity that hadn't been seen since the ancient Mauryan era. And doing so sparked this distinctly indigenous cultural revival.
Part 2. Forging the Gupta Empire.
What's absolutely wild here is the leap from total obscurity to absolute power. I mean, they started out as minor local rulers in the Magadha region. We're talking figures like Srigupta and Kathokacha. But then, under Chandragupta I, they just explode into imperial expansion. And they didn't just do it through warfare. They pulled it off through a brilliant matrimonial alliance with the powerful, well-established Lichavi clan. A real game changer. And to cement this newfound power, Chandragupta adopted the title Maharaja Diraja, which literally translates to King of Kings. This wasn't just a fancy new name. This was the ultimate imperial rebranding. It signaled to everyone around them, hey, we are no longer just local chiefs. We are the undisputed emperors of a rising superpower. It's a huge flex. But it gets even wilder under his successor, Samudragupta. This is a man historians literally refer to as the Napoleon of India, no joke. His sweeping military campaigns across both northern and southern India were so legendary, so relentless, that they were actually carved into stone on the famous Allahabad pillar, also known as the Prayaga Prashasti, by his devoted court poet Harisena. Moving on to part 3, the cultural and scientific zenith. So, enter the reign of Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya, and the empire hits this unbelievable cultural renaissance. Tradition tells us his court hosted the Navaratnas, the 9 gems. These were the era's absolute brightest minds, including the legendary poet and dramatist Kalidasa. Now, sure, scholars debate whether all 9 of these geniuses literally sat in the same room at the exact same time. But honestly, even as a tradition, it perfectly proves one thing. This court was a massive, irresistible magnet for unparalleled intellectual genius. And that genius definitely extended to the hard sciences, spearheaded by the brilliant mathematician Aryabhata. This guy calculated the value of pi with stunning precision. He proposed a heliocentric adjacent model of the solar system centuries before Europe even touched the idea. And he advanced the decimal numeration system. Think about why this matters to us today. This mind-bending math directly laid the groundwork for the numbers you and I rely on every single day. Which brings us to part 4. The seeds of imperial decline. Now, the vulnerability of the Guptas becomes glaringly obvious when you compare them to the earlier Mauryan Empire. Where the Mauryans were highly centralized with strict bureaucratic control, the Guptas were surprisingly decentralized and feudal. Instead of direct imperial rule, they relied heavily on copper plate land grants to pay Brahmins and temples. This system left local chieftains with hereditary autonomy, basically a really dangerous amount of independence, bound only by tribute. And that loose, fragile structure, it was completely unequipped for what came next. The Hunas, or Hephthalites. These relentless, brutal invasions started battering the borders under Kumaragupta I, and then just accelerated violently under Skandagupta. Defending against wave after wave of these attacks literally began to bankrupt the state and fracture their entire military apparatus. The ultimate, undeniable proof of this financial ruin, it was right in their pockets. Late in Skandagupta's reign, there is a sharp, massive decrease in the gold purity of his coinage. I mean, they were literally debasing their own currency. It's this tangible, physical evidence of a state experiencing total fiscal distress. They simply couldn't afford their own military anymore.
So ultimately, the center just could not hold. Because of that decentralized structure we talked about, once the money dried up and the military weakened, powerful local feudatories saw their chance. They began breaking away from the imperial core. By the mid-6th century, the once mighty Gupta dynasty had totally dissolved into a constellation of regional successor states like the Makhaharis and the Vardanas. The imperial lineage was officially finished.
Finally, Part 5, an enduring civilizational legacy.
The empire itself might have fallen off the map, but just look at what survived. They left this incredible civilizational imprint. We're talking about elevated Sanskrit literature, standardized Hindu iconography, the definition of classical Indian aesthetics, and of course, gifting the world the decimal numeration system. Their political reign ended, for sure, but their cultural reign continued to shape South Asian civilization for millennia.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question. What truly makes an empire last? Is it the temporary borders drawn on a map, or is it the enduring power of its ideas? The Guptas proved that while armies fade, brilliance echoes forever. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.